Hello everyone. In this session, I am going to discuss about John Dryden's great poem, that is Absalom and Achitophel. John Dryden was a poet, dramatist, satirist, translator, and one of the chief founder of modern English prose, the first great English critic, the most representative writer of Restoration, and the greatest literary man of his time. He was born at Aldwinkle in Northamptonshire. Although his parents seem to have sided with Parliament against the king, there is no evidence that the poet grew up in a strict Puritan family. His father, a country gentleman of modern fortune, and he was died in 1700. So let's see about his work, Absalom and Achitophel. It was written in the Restoration time. So first we see that what is Restoration time. The Restoration age starts from the year 1660, and when Charles II returned from exile. It is called Restoration because monarchical system was restored. Restoration is known as the age of rationalism and order. Almost of all human activity shows a rational influence. The writers of this period do not let their thoughts to diverge into fairy land. They have no place for emotionalism in their writing. They write in clarity and also avoid extravagance. Great advancement in scientific knowledge marks the works of Restoration writers who believes in accuracy. It makes the beginning of the modern age, which laid the foundation of modern prose from metaphysical prose of the earlier half of 17th century. Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel, Conquering the Way of the World, are the representative works of Restoration age. So let's start the Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel. Absalom and Achitophel, it is a political satire written by John Dryden. This is a work which is written for political benefits. It is a satirical work. John Dryden mainly wrote it to show or to present what is going on in the under of Charles II in England. There was political instability in the rule of Charles II after Restoration. That's why Charles II requested John Dryden to write a satirical work to present the political condition of that time, so that he can present that who were the royalistic, who were the anti-royalistic, and what are the intention of anti-royalistic. To present that thing, he chose the biblical history of Absalom and Achitophel. Absalom, who got the throne, he stood up against his father. So there are many characters in this poem. First is David. He is the king of Israel, and compared to Charles II, king of England, Absalom is the illegitimate son of David. David is happy with his wife, but he was quite sexual in nature. He was having different mistresses, and as his queen was not able to give birth to baby, he was having many illegitimate sons from his mistresses. Absalom is the Duke of Monmouth. He is very good in nature. He is very strong. He can be the successor of throne, but he is not a legitimate son, so he can't be a successor. Achitophel, who is the Earl of Shaftesbury, he was the main anti-royalistic. He was the one who revolted against David. and Korah. Other character is Jimri, Shimi, and many other. So let's start the summary of Absalom and Achitophel. It starts with Achitophel, who was the one who planned whole plot, and he thinks if he want to revolt against David, so he have to do something to convince Absalom. Absalom loves his father so much, and David also loves Absalom so much because of his strength, power, and intelligence. As Absalom was illegitimated, so David decided James to be his successor. James was Roman Catholic and all the others were prostrate. All the anti royalistic did not want James and Roman Catholic to be a successor. That's why Achitophel plans whole thing. Achitophel persuades Absalom and says, "You should be on the throne because you are very much popular among public. Secondly, you belong to royal blood. And thirdly, the king is powerless. He was not popular among people. That's why you should take throne. You should revolt against him." But because of love, Absalom was not agreed to revolt his father, but again Achitophel gives different reason that David was not ruled properly. There was many travestic activities going on. If you would come to power, you could solve all the problems. Then Absalom got ready to revolt against his father. Now David comes to know about the planning and he dissolves the parliament because parliament was trying to bring a notice in which James could not become a successor. Absalom says that he want to go on a tour and he just leaves and go to a tour so he can meet people and make them realize that how efficient he was, and if he would come to power then he would work hard and change the situation. He also cries for taking people in favor of him, so people from different community comes with Absalom and become against to David, and they were saying, we yes we will all throne Absalom. John Dryden explained, if the situation was bad, if the situation was in territory, it does not mean that we overthrow king. He presents the essential qualities of David. He clearly present he had having many mistresses, but it was the order of that time. He defends king on his bad thing again and again, but he was totally against the anti-royalistic things which were happening. When royalistic things which were happening, it was going to revolt soon. David takes up a meeting and with prominence which was brought up by royalistic who were ready to die for king. They were the supporters of King David. King says that I have dissolved the parliament and now I would take good decision, whatever helpful for society. And he assures all the problem would be cured, all the situation will be handled properly. The people convinced by Absalom and Achitophel, that's why they became anti-royalistic and that's why they were doing revolt. When everything resolves, they become happy and cool down. And finally, on a happy note, David was able to be thrown. On that note, this particular work's end. This is a work published in 1681. It is a satirical work in which he had satire hardly on the anti-royalistic were against king, and he written it in an epic form. This satire is very much different from others, and he has written it in an heroic work in which king and some people who were against him are there. Such situation, heroic deeds can happen in the course of work. These are the possibilities which John Dryden had taken and write this work. So that is the summary of the play. And the other important question comes that it is a biblical allegory. So yes, it is a biblical allegory. Dryden made use of the Bible in Absalom and Achitophel. When he wrote this poem, the parallel between certain incident of the Bible and the contemporary situation in England had already been recognized. The Bible was the most familiar and authoritative book to the 17th century readers. Charles II often compared to King David. Achitophel was familiar term for an able counselor. It was by his wit that Dryden drew English history into a pattern and enriched his allegory. The use of Old Testament story in the poem gave several advantages to Dryden. It creates the impression that man's revolt against his king is a recurrent phenomenon in history. The poem also suggests Adam's revolt against God at the instigation of devil that we saw in the Paradise Lost, and the use of the biblical story gave freedom to Dryden to manipulate the characters just as he liked. Dryden was also able to project his theme, the illegality of rebel, on the corruption of politicians. He was able to impose mythical characters of David, Achitophel, and Absalom upon contemporary historical characters. So that's all about the Absalom and Achitophel. Thank you so much for listening so carefully.